Hi there, Mike McArthur from the Oshkosh Public Library, ready with more Librarian Learns. This is the show where I take a look at bits of Oshkosh history that I've wondered about myself or that someone has asked me about while I've been working at the library. Today we're looking at an artist and a photographer whose work all of us have probably seen at one point, particularly if you took a social studies class ever. But until maybe just a few months ago, I didn't even realize he was from Oshkosh. Today we're talking about Lewis Hine. Lewis Hine is most known for a long series of portraits from the early 20th century documenting child labor. He took these photos while working for the National Child Labor Committee, roughly from about 1908 to 1923. These photos humanized these child workers and brought a real face to a problem that many Americans didn't realize existed or didn't want to believe existed in the United States at that time. And with the help of these photos, helped push the country's first child labor laws. Hine's work is also notably artistically in that it broke with a more painterly style of photography that was popular at the time. He favored kind of a harsh realism and focused on subjects like immigrants, child laborers, and the American worker. In a lecture Hine gave once, he stated, "The picture is a symbol that brings one immediately into the close touch with reality." People who wrote about Hine often just blew off the first 20 plus years of his life. Sometimes, if they mentioned Oshkosh at all, they might have thought it was in Minnesota. Lewis Wicks Hine was born on September 26, 1874, the youngest of three children. His father, Douglas Hull Hine, was from New England and was married to Sarah Hayes, a schoolteacher from Cairo, New York. The family moved to Richland, Wisconsin in 1857. Douglas served in the Army during the Civil War, most likely as a drum major. After the war, the family moved to Costa Rica for a while, and then when coming back, moved to Oshkosh in 1871, most likely because there were other Hine family members in the area. The family opened a coffee house restaurant at 28 Main Street and lived upstairs. This is where Lewis Hine grew up. Douglas Hine died in 1892 from kind of a freak accident, possible suicide, while working on a firearm. It discharged and ultimately took his life. Lewis dropped out of high school just shy of graduating to take on several jobs to help support the family. Hine was doing a lot of work and kind of actually at the time working his way up in a local bank, but found the work unappealing and kind of uninteresting, so he was taking classes at the normal school at the time, including several art classes. So because not a whole lot was written about his time in Oshkosh, the question really becomes, what was Oshkosh's influence on him as a person and later as a photographer and artist? Lewis Hine was 23 years old, working at the bank in 1898 during the famous woodworkers' strike. Susan M. Nurnberg, who conducted extensive research on Hine, speculated that Hine must have been following the trial, since essentially everyone was, and believed it had a profound impact on Hine's worldview. Hine would have been following it in the papers and may have even, heard the speeches of famous lawyer Clarence Darrow, who spoke on behalf of the woodworkers. Regarding the Payne Lumber Company's use of child labor, Darrow had the following to say: "I do not care whether the little children went into the factory before they were 14 or the day after. It is a disgrace to the civilization in which we live that they are there at all." So if you look at Hine's later work, you gotta believe that he heard these words or saw this struggle and really ethically, morally connected to it. In 1899, Hine met probably the next most important person in his life, Frank Manny. Frank Manny was the Oshkosh Normal School's new head of experimental education psychology. Manny gave Hine part-time work at the normal school, and while he was going there, Lewis took classes on education, art, and drawing. It was Manny who convinced Hine to enroll in the University of Chicago. Later, Hine would join Manny in New York at the Ethical Cultural School. In 1904, Hine married Sarah Rich in Oshkosh, which would be the last time he visited Oshkosh. After that, there's really no record of him ever returning to the city. Manny was also instrumental in starting Hine's photography career. Manny wanted to document the work at the Ethical Cultural School, and he handed Lewis a camera in 1904, and thus began Lewis Hine's photography career. He started off by taking pictures at the school and then at Ellis Island, where he took numerous pictures of newly arrived immigrants. In 1908, he left his job at the school and began his work at the National Child Labor Committee, where he would take most of his most famous images. In 1918, Hine was hired by the Red Cross to go to Paris and document the Red Cross's relief efforts during World War I. Hine is also famous for his work portrait photos showing like the common man heroically laboring in an industrialized world. However, ultimately, Hine struggled financially after the end of the Progressive era. Though he worked with many of the New Deal agencies in the 1930s, his harsh realism and progressive focus appeared to have fallen out of fashion. Additionally, Hine was also not hired because he refused to hand over his prints and his negatives. This got him labeled as difficult to work with due to an artistic temperament. His greatest success during this time period was his series of photos taken during the construction of the Empire State Building. Hine shot these photos over a period of 6 months while workers hung over steel beams and welded and performed construction at dizzying heights. Hine was right there with his camera, which, if you remember what a camera at this time looked like, this wasn't like shooting this stuff with an iPhone like you can kind of do today. Hine, unfortunately, after that, kind of fell into obscurity and continued to live in kind of financially unstable